another interview with Hamaguchi. This is really interesting because this is about the changes that were made to FF7 Rebirth to like keep players like interested, right? Either way, Hamaguchi talks about the importance of retaining player interest in a remake split into 3 parts. At the end of the day, chat, comes down to marketing, and that's what I've said the whole time is they need to keep people interested, whether they're doing the changes because they want to, because they think it will keep people interested, because they actually want to change something about the story, because something will change in the end of the story. Whether it's any of those, and whether that actually happens in part 3, and it rolls out to be a sequel or not a sequel, or leads into Advent Children or covers Advent Children, whatever it does, it doesn't matter. Like, there's no reason to talk about if it will or won't, because that's just what's been the talk of the town since Rebirth came out. But like, it's marketing, bro. That's kind of what. Let's talk about it. Colossal mental breakdown incoming from me? You think so? Both Final Fantasy VII Remake and FF7 Rebirth feature some significant story changes compared to the OG release. As Rebirth director Hamaguchi told game developer, adding the new interpretation of the story was deliberate to maintain player interest over time, considering that this remake treatment of FF7 is split into 3 parts. Yes, that's makes sense. And like, while they're doing this so that people stay intrigued, right? I still think they probably just don't want to remake the original game 1-to-1 with the high fidelity. Even if this game, say, turned them a bunch of profits each part, and they were like magicians and were like gods, and we're like, yes, we're gonna make $10 billion for each part that comes out no matter what we do, I'm sure they'd probably still prefer to change stuff up, just because a lot of the OG development team, like Hitase, right, who worked on the original game, and like Nomura and all these people, I'm sure they don't want to just do the same thing, because that's not fun for them either. I don't think anybody wants to do the same thing X amount of years later, because it's like they want to evolve and grow and do new things as developers, because games take a while to develop, and you probably don't want to just remake something. Also, it would take them way less time if they didn't add anything new. I think we would have had all 3 parts by now if it was just a 1-to-1. Either way, we want to keep the players interested in our game, but in order to do that, we can't simply just add new elements. That won't be enough, Hamaguchi said during an interview at TGS. We wanted to add a new interpretation to the story, entirely new story elements, like the ghosts, right? That a lot of people hate. I don't know, I'm indifferent about them. And things like that to, again, sustain the player interest and have players look forward and be curious to the conclusion of the remake trilogy. Okay, let's just keep reading before I talk about it. When working on remakes, Hamaguchi said he first tries to think what the original players have in mind. In this case, what they loved about FF7. There are parts he didn't want to alter or change and decided to keep as is, but there were others that the team wanted to create something new for the modern generation of players. Like all the new minigames, which I love. A lot of people don't like them, but I love them. There's, you know, a couple stinkers here and there, but surely no game is perfect. Shout out the Dolphin game. I love that one. And the Frog one's kind of fun too. Way better. Dude, after playing the original game, do you know what's so much better than the OG Fort Condor? It's so bad in the original. Absolutely terrible. I would never wish that on anybody to do, but you have to do it to like get the egg or something, whatever it is. It's trash. But God, it's so good in Remake or Rebirth. It's so good. They cooked so hard with that one. But either way. So still, there are clear expectations in mind, which the team took into consideration to preserve that interest. For context, FF7 launched in April 2020, with Rebirth following in 2024, hoping to ready the 3rd and final installment by 2027, which makes sense. I think everybody's assuming that. Now, I wonder if it's actually going to come out in like September of 27. That's so far away. That's like 2 years away on the dot. Or if it will be early 27. I think most people think like end of like Q3, Q4 2027, but it might be earlier, man. I don't know. PlayStation exclusive on launch, I would imagine it comes out early 2027. If it is on PC and PlayStation, it would probably be pushed back, because those extra like, what, 6 to 8 months, whatever, most likely would be needed to have a PC port, because that shit takes a while, you know? Especially if they made part 1 and 2 specifically for the PlayStation, and then, you know, they go straight into part 3 development after Rebirth came out, and even like before, technically, they're still using, you know, the PlayStation hardware as like the baseline. So I don't know. But about Aerith, that's in bold too. Diego knows. Obviously, when we look at FF7 Rebirth, I think a lot of users were interested to find out what's going to happen to Aerith and her fate, Hamaguchi said. So because of that, we tried to create a game and depict the story in a way where players won't be able to tell what's going on or what's going to happen to Aerith until the very end. Also, what's going on. Players can't tell what's going on either. That's a typo on my end, but that's also true. Most people don't know what's going on, even myself included. Positive, though. It's not a bad thing. I enjoy the what the fuck factor to a degree. Now, with the team working on the third entry, the director thinks that players will be interested in knowing what's going to happen with Meteor, for example, as well as the overall conclusion. That's very much true. Meteor, what? I would assume the same thing will happen. It will be stopped. Unless, yeah, obviously it's going to be stopped. But I guess how it will be stopped is like the big thing. When asked if retaining player interest was a motivation for the boldest changes to the story, Hamaguchi said that it's hard to describe it as is. Rather, it was about ensuring success. There we go. The key for this project to succeed is to determine what kind of changes we would want to bring in order to sustain the player interest throughout the remake trilogy. Without determining where we want to change some things up in terms of story, it's kind of hard to ensure that the project succeeds, not just Remake and Rebirth, but the entire Remake Trilogy. So we're sort of trying to push boundaries in that sense and trying to figure out what kind of bold changes we can bring to the story, but we're also trying to make careful decisions around that. At least I've said this for a while, and I'm not some like super smart analyst of video games and things, and you know, I just take a guess here and there of what's going to happen. But like, the whole point is to make sure that the games do well, right? He just says they have to make sure the project succeeds, the whole thing succeeds. It's got to sell, because once again, if it's a 1-to-1, which you know a lot of people would be happy, I'd be happy if it was a 1-to-1 as well, because the original game is phenomenal and holds up to this day. No one after part 1, no one would buy Rebirth. You know, like if part 1 came out, they're like, oh my god, it looks beautiful. That's how most people were when part 1 was announced. They were like, I hate that it's 3 parts. However, I'm excited. And then when the ending of Remake came, a lot of people were like, this sucks. Like, I don't like the ghosts, which is fine, right? That's okay. I understand that side. You know, even though I disagree, I understand that side of why people wouldn't like that. But then people would just skip part 2. Because if they've played the OG game, they're like, okay, I know what happens here, and then I'll wait till part 3 to see the ending, because I want to see the cool ending. But it just wouldn't do well. So they're like, we got to make this really interesting throughout all 3 parts, because it's going to take us 7 years, or fucking 20 years at this point, from, you know, them starting the remake, and then it getting canned, and then them being like, hey, we're going to take control of this, because we don't like how it is, and then making Remake and Rebirth, and then part 3, especially now that Square Enix is, like, kind of trying to get some profits back after the past like 3-4 years of not doing too well. But like, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm like yapping about it, but it's just, it's interesting that Hamaguchi is saying it directly. Like, yeah, we got to make this whole thing successful. Whether he as the creators want it to be different, or we know the fans want it to be different, or we want it to be the same, or we know that the fans want it to be the same. Whatever, you know, corner that you're on. And that they're like, we just got to make it sell well. Even if it's like a passion project, you can't be passionate about something and make something when you ain't got no money. You can't do that, right? They're not going to pull it out of their ass, especially now from Square Enix, of all people, over the past couple years, unfortunately, right? Like, they got to make that dough. So to do that, you got to keep people interested. And like I said, I'm not saying anything profound right now. This is just what the article is saying. But it's just cool to see that, like, yeah, this shit's got to do well, even if you do agree or disagree of what we've done with it, you know what I mean? But that's pretty much it, chat.